Imagine a world with no cold calling. A world where companies don't sell your data to other companies who want to pester you. At G4 Claims, we don't cold call and we don't buy a single lead from data companies. Oh, and if you're due any compensation from your car accident, you pay nothing to us at all. For full accident management support, including motor replacement, repairs and personal injury compensation claims, just search G4 Claims today. For help the way you want it.
Hi and welcome to this week's episode of the DW podcast. I am joined by someone, in my eyes, that I think is an absolute legend. I'm delighted to have him on, Tas Pappas, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, mate.
How's life?
Life's good. Apart from this lockdown that's been dragging on a bit longer than it should. I mean, the rest of our country's back to normal. But apart from that, I'm blessed, still working, still being able to abseil and do the window cleaning. I'm lucky one to have had a job. Yeah.
I've noticed some of your videos on Instagram, and I don't know if it's maybe just in your blood that you have to be a bit of a daredevil and take risks, because I certainly wouldn't want to be up to the heights that you're at with the window cleaning. It's like skyscrapers and all sorts.
Yeah, I mean, it was a job that I could, when I first got out of jail, I had to film a video part for, before all this mayhem was finished. And I was working in a warehouse, packing boxes. But by the end of the day, my knees would be too swollen. So I needed a job where I could rest my knees, but I'm not really an office type of person.
Really?
Then I saw one day some guys sitting in these seats just abseiling, cleaning windows, and another friend of mine just so happened to know the guys who were abseiling, and then the rest is history.
That's amazing.
Started pursuing that, said a few prayers, and then the guy signed me on without any experience and
Never looked back.
Never looked back, mate.
For those that don't know who you are, I'd imagine the majority of people watching or listening to this podcast don't know exactly who you are and your story, but tell us a bit about Tas Pappas in your eyes. I mean, from the outside looking in, it's born in Melbourne, Australia in 75. Brought up to Greek and Australian parents, and then went to America and basically took over the skateboarding world, challenging Tony Hawk alongside your brother, Ben. And I mean, I'm sure we'll cover it as well. There was, you had a bit of a downfall, and it looks like you're very much back on the straight and narrow and having a great life.
Yeah, I mean, much like most people these days, I had really young parents, and they didn't really see eye to eye. A lot of the the usual stuff, the fights, the family life that just wasn't working, so there was a bit of hurt in there, and they both had to work and stuff, so I had like a babysitter back in when I was really young, who used to she bashed me a bit, and so there was a bit of childhood trauma there. But I mean, much like a lot of people who I've met, everyone's got a story, but from there, it's pretty full on actually. But like then I got sexually abused by some pedophile, and so then as I grew up, I kept feeling like I had to prove myself as a man, because of what happened to me. And so I suppose that's where I got the chip on my shoulder, that I had to go out and make something of myself because of what happened to me. I thought that made me less of a man, or I'd let my dad down. But I had no idea at that point as a kid that there was such thing as a victim. So, in my mind, I had all kinds of trauma, demons in my head just playing with me. So, I just thought I had to become the best at, or at least become a world champion at something to prove myself, to my dad. But my dad never actually wanted me to prove myself. So
I think that was
go figure.
more in your head than in your dad's head. You know,
It was completely in my head. And when I finally told him when I got older, he was just shattered, you know. So he had no idea. But yeah.
Was that someone that was close to the family, Tas, or was that just someone in the local area?
It wasn't someone in the family. It was someone. There was this place in Maribyrnong where I used to go called Humes, and it was where all these guys used to ride motorbikes. And so I used to go down there when I was, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8, and just get, ask the guys to jump on the back and they just burn you around on KX 80s, KX 250s, and then when the cops would come, they'd all burn off and, get chased by the cops. And so it was one of the guys from down there, yeah.
I suppose at that age, you're looking up to these people and thinking, who are these cool guys with motorbikes, and they're giving us a shot on there,
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one plus I can get out of it, though, is it's kept me very protective as far as I can with my son, Billy, because I sort of blew it when I was in America, because by that point, I'd constantly been thinking I'd have to prove myself, had a chip on my shoulder, and it just bled through into, it was good for skating, but it wasn't good for my relationships with people. And so I blew my relationship with my ex-wife in America, and in the process, I failed my kids in America, so I couldn't be there for them to protect them. So that was the hard lesson about it all. But, I made my bed, and I'm just thankful, God's merciful. Gave me a second chance, and I have a new family now, and I'm just, praying I can get my other kids in my life and possibly make the peace with Colleen,
And taking it back, to those early days in Australia, you were always on the vert ramp in Melbourne alongside your friends and your brother. When did you realise, that I've really got a talent here? I can take this further than just Australia?
It was never like you think, like one day, like, I'm gonna, all of a sudden, I think I can do this. It was more like you skate with a bunch of guys, and you get to go overseas and you skate with the other pros, and you're constantly striving. And then you get to the point where you're doing all the same tricks as them, but it never feels like you've arrived, because there's always another trick to learn. There's always, let's just say a competition, for instance, you have to, even if you can do all the moves, you have to do them again on that day. So you never actually think you've arrived. It's just, if you get blessed with a good day where you nail 17 tricks in a run that happens to win, then you look back, wow, I did it. But then there's always the next comp. It's like you have to do it all over again. And, I snapped a femur when I was at Woodward Skate Camp when I was 17. I'd crushed 2 vertebrae. So it was always like, you never really felt like, that it's in the bag. It was always like a struggle. And I always used to think, I couldn't handle living the normal life, just working 9 to 5. But looking back now, the stress of being a pro skater and having to skate through injuries and coming back, having to do the same trick you just crushed a vertebrae on, 8 months before, you have to do that move within a month of coming off injury to get back on the comp circuit. Way more stressful than the life I'm living now. So it's just funny, the mind games,
You touched on it early in the chat. You mentioned All That Mayhem, the documentary that came out in 2014, about your life as a skateboarder and also your brothers as well. And I think early in that documentary, that for those that have watched it and for those that haven't, certainly get on it, but you touched on it, and you says that you were skating in Australia and you're watching videos from, pro skaters in America, and you thought, I can do that. I can go over there and I think the quote was something like, "We're going to smash Hawk. You know, we're going to take Tony Hawk on."
No. The quote was, I'd always be in my room every night, right? And I'd because of the martial arts I did as a kid, I learned dive rolls and how to throw, and I started realizing all these martial art moves were, it's skate orientated too. It's like a McTwist, it's a dive roll. So I'd practice these dive rolls on my bed. But what I'd be thinking in my head, I kept hearing from everyone, you would never be able to beat Tony Hawk, right? So I was I don't know, 14 or 13, 14, spinning McTwist, rolling up one side of my bed, diving onto the bed, holding the board, forward roll, then 180 out on the other side of my bed, and pretending I was doing a McTwist in my room before I'd learned them. And then in my head, I'm going, God, please let me be the one who can go there and beat him. You know, it was just seemed like an impossible dream when I was that's what that part was. Yeah. It wasn't so much like, I'm gonna, you know, like, I'm gonna do it. I have to do it. It was more like the way I was doing it back then. I was actually asking God to let it happen. You know, give me the ability to do it, because I've always believed in God. You know, I've always prayed, and sure enough, you know, that all started unfolding. You know, I had the Hill brothers at that point sponsored my brother and I, and gave us all the product we needed right when we couldn't afford it. So that was a blessing there. You know, then got to know Tony Magnuson, who came out, and they all saw that we were trying. So it wasn't like Ben had more, he'd learn tricks with less effort. I just try my ass off. I just, you know, and make sure I'd get it, you know, and then get it smooth after just going through absolute hell trying to get it. So it just goes back to that thing when I was, you know, because of what happened when I was really young. I just, you know, I thought, you know, I'd let my dad down because of what happened. So I just wanted to prove I was, you know, something. So I just had this chip on my,
you certainly did. Was it 17 when you first moved to the States?
Well, what happened was Tony Magnuson came out with H Street, and I just slammed not long. We just got in the bowl and I slammed. My back's playing up on me again, actually, so I've got to get my back straight. But
all those years of skating.
Yeah. But so Tony Magnuson came out. I think I was 15 when we first went to America, and so we went there for a month, stayed with the Hay Street house, and then I went out there again when I was 16. And with my brother Ben, and then when I was 17, I did work experience, went into Hardcore Enterprises, which is Globe Shoes now. And I did the work experience, and then I just remember the guy I was friends with back at that point, Gregor Rankin, he was another pro skater. He said, you know, I remember him saying, you know, giving me a talk. He's like, look, if you're going to do this, you better do it. Otherwise, get a job. And then that was the point. I thought, right, I didn't think I could do it, but I was going to try my ass off doing it. There was nothing else. So I wasn't like, hey, I can do this. It was more like I was trying it with all my might, you know, just to make it happen. So I went to America, kept skating, kept learning the tricks, realized I had to get better at certain things, and then just kept slugging away, man. And then, yeah, things started working out. Yeah,
it started happening. Was it Tampa, Florida? You were in it first. Is that right?
Yeah. No, I first went to California and then stayed with Danny Way and stuff. But when I got there wasn't so much of a vert scene. There was a lot of street going on, and then I had to go to. I realised I had to get over to Woodward Skate Camp. And so that was where I filmed my first Wheels of Fortune. And then I, from there, that was where I snapped my femur. Because this is a trippy story. Because I started listening to this band called, this real satanic band, right? God-hating band. It was like full death metal. And then I got over to, right when I got to Pennsylvania, I got off the plane, and then Woodward Skate Camp were like, well, you're 17, you're not old enough, there's no one to sign for you, you can't come in. And I just spent the last of my money to get to Pennsylvania from California. And I was just hoping to get there, right? And then get in. So I got there, and then they're saying, well, you're underage. You can't just come in, and you need your parents' signature. We got to at least see your parents. And this is back when it was faxes. There was no, it was 1990, like 2 or 3. I don't know the exacts. So then I've heard that I can't get in, and then I've just broken down. I was 17 on my own in America, ran out of money, had to spend money on a hotel at Newark Airport. And then I've got on my knees and I've said, God, I promise no more satanic music, no more. I won't do anything that you don't like if you get me into this skate camp, right? And I was crying because I didn't want to have to come back to Australia as a failure. And then my dad would have to pay for a ticket back because I just threw my other ticket away. Because I lied to my dad and my mum saying, yeah, I'll be back in a couple of months. Once I got there, I was just like, I'm not coming back until I'm pro, right? So I'm underage over there. And then I've prayed, God, please get me into Woodward. And I made all these promises. And then, man, this was the best I'd ever skated. I got to Woodward skate camp, got in, everything sweet. They said you can stay here for the entire summer for the 3 months. You just got to work in the kitchen, cleaning dishes for 3 months, and you can skate all summer long, stay for free and get fed. Brilliant. And that was when I filmed my Wheels of Fortune part. Then I had all these different companies. I think I was talking to World. And then Mad Circle, and I wasn't sure who to go with, and then like an idiot, I started remembering that, all these satanic bands that would get me hyped to skate. But what had happened was I started skating so good at that. This was the most consistent I'd ever been in my life, right? And I never got back to that consistency.
When you were 17?
I was doing... Like for the time, I only had a handful of tricks at that point. I ended up with more tricks later on in my career. But at this point, I remember there was a point I wasn't bailing any kickflip indies. I was doing alley-oop kickflip mutes, corner to corner on this ramp, heel flip gauges, 360 airs, fakie fives, all these different tricks that were pretty, like latest tricks at the time. And I just wasn't bailing. I just wasn't falling off, barely falling off. And it got to a point, I actually started thinking, I'm like, I'm God on earth. And I kept forgetting about the prayer, how God had not only got me in, it was the best I'd ever skated, right? And then this one day, I thought, oh, yeah, I'll chuck that Deicide satanic band on. And I had no idea that this Woodward camp originally was run by a bunch of Christians. I had no idea. And here I am praying to God, right? And then all of a sudden, for one stupid day, I've put Deicide on the system, and it's like, all this crazy satanic, bad, talking bad about God, talking like real bad, like real anti-God lyrics to a bunch of kids, little kids that are, in a skate park. And I've jumped on this mini ramp, done a fakie hang up, no lie. When I've gone up, landed on the board, for some weird reason, I backflipped off the lip, landed on my head on the flat, kneed myself in the face. And I thought, nothing of it. Completely forgetting the promise I made to God. If he got me in, I wouldn't listen to this stuff anymore, right? Then I had to shoot, I think it was Lance Dawes or another guy. I'm not sure who it was, but it was for slap. They wanted me to shoot an alley-oop kickflip mute, which I was doing at least 6 foot high, edge to edge, every time at this place. Sometimes 8 footers, pretty good for the time. It was a smaller ramp. Yeah. Then I just said, all right, stand there. I'll do a little air the way it's going to look. And it was only a 1 foot air, right? And then as soon as I did this little, I've been doing like 8 to 10 foot airs all summer, not bailing. All of a sudden, I'm bailing everything. I wasn't piecing it together yet. Then I did this little air showing him how I do it. I'd over-rotated, bang. snapped my femur in half on the bottom of the flat from an alley-oop mute there, a real small one, after doing 8 to 10 footers the entire summer. Didn't jerry that I'd broken the promise to God, right? But then from that point, I saw who to ride for, because Mad Circle, Justin Gerard and Steve Douglas, they didn't care that I'd snapped my femur. They said, well, you'll come back from this. And they stuck by me while I was in hospital. Then I got a metal rod put in my leg. I snapped my femur right at the end of the summer. And then I busted down to Tampa, Florida, stayed in the skate park. You saw that bit in the movie, the Charlie Brown Room. And then from that point on, I was, that's when I started, trying all different drugs in Tampa, smoking crack, doing tons of acid. And then this band the band I promised I wouldn't even go listen to anymore, I ended up at this guy's house.
No
right?
way.
Yeah, Glenn Benton's house from Deerside. Full satanic.
Is that because the skateboard scene and the music scene was interconnected?
No, it just turned out that my mate, who his older brother knew the death metal scene, and this band so happened to be from Tampa, Florida, and I ended up going there. Then when I met him, he's branding upside down crosses in his forehead, and he shook my hand. He's like, spread the word. It was like the opposite of Christianity. It was satanic gospel. And here I am getting stuck into it again with my fresh broken femur. And then there was one night I had like an epiphany in my room. I'm singing this to everyone, I'm wasted. Then I realized I'm basically preaching Satanism. And I've always ran to God my whole life, and it was always God who delivered when I wanted to. Anything good that came my way, like my abilities, or I'd always prayed for. So it was a weird turn of events. It was like the battle, and I'd always, when I'd start doing good, I'd be trying to do the right thing by God, and my life would get better. And then as soon as I started, partying, and it's like I started getting sucked in and to the other side, and I'm hooked on all of these drugs again, and ended up going, in and out of jail. And so it's been a battle.
It must have
been a battle, to say the least.
Must have been challenging, Tas, for your parents as well, because you were 17 in a foreign country. They must have been wondering, what's he up to? Is he going to succeed? Like, is he safe out there? What? It must have been.
I didn't talk to him for nearly 8 months one time. I just wasn't thinking. And then I finally called him, like, oh, you're alive. So, yeah, I was a nightmare. But it was all the trauma, It was all the trauma. I just didn't think of anyone else. I turned full selfish, you know what I mean? Because of this chip I had on my shoulder, because I thought I was gay, and I was confused about it, because the first sexual encounter I had was some, bloke in his 20s doing things to me when I was 6 or 7. And then I first heard the word, so I heard, like, I was young, real young, and I heard someone say, oh, that's a poofter. And I was like, what's that? And then they explained it, and I was cut to the bone. I thought, oh no, if my dad thinks I'm that, he won't love me anymore. And then when he finally found all this stuff out, it was he was like, it's not your fault. Like, So yeah, I always had that chip, which led backwards and forwards. Then I started blaming God for not protecting me as a kid. But I can see now, like, once I went to jail after it, we'll get to that part, but when I was in jail, most of the guys I became friends with, I realised once I started talking to them, it was all the same story. Sexually abused, a lot of them from a pedo, grew up angry. Not that it's an excuse. Not every single person does it. But you sort of grow up, you felt like a victim. And then you start to, it's like as a protection mechanism, you're like, well, I'm not going to be the victim anymore. You'll be the victim. Yeah. You're on high alert, and you're always trying to prove yourself. And yeah, it's a very bad thing.
I think there's a massive link there as well, to people who are in jail and also, childhood trauma. It's a lot of the time you don't recover from that. It scars you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it can, because I've heard of, like, some people it happens to, they either become abusers themselves but a lot of the guys I met, they're just, self-destructing. Because it's especially when I was growing up, it was the 90s and that. And You know, my dad, I'd go to the footy with my dad and my uncles, and they were Greeks from Alexandria in Egypt. So they came over in one of the first real big wave of, you know, Greeks and Italians. In Australia, they're called wogs. So back when they first got here, that's the derogatory term, a lot of the Aussies, right, and the wogs, they'd be fighting. You know, it wasn't very politically correct back then, right? So I remember going to the footy with Dad when I was only like 5, 6, and it'd be my Uncle Terry, my Uncle George, my dad, all their mates, Hunch, all these different blokes from like Lygon Street in Carlton, because they were, Dad grew up in the Carlton Commission flats. And then we'd go to the footy, and then some, you know, in the Aussies, they'd be all Collingwood, and then they'd be like, you know, like, oh, F off Carlton, you know, and then my dad and that, they just they'd like love going to the footy for, so they could punch on. And I just remember one day my dad going, listen, Tas, stand in this corner here. He goes, if you see Dad get hit, don't worry. I like it. We're gonna fix these Collingwood supporters up, right? Because no one talks about Carlton. You get that? No one talks about Carlton like that. And my dad was a young dad. He was in his mid-20s. And then I just remember looking back at this all-in brawl at the footy, and Dad and my uncles just smashing these guys, and then them getting smashed and people getting bottled, and I'm just sitting there watching this. And then with what happened to me, I thought, how am I ever going to live up to these psychos? Yeah. Right? I'm like, these guys are mental. You know, so my whole life I was thinking, how am I ever going to end up like that? So I was I wanted to, you know, be able to hold my own. But then when I heard, you know, the word poofter for the first time, I thought that was it. They're just going to think I'm that and they won't love me. So that was where that chip on my shoulder came in, just trying to prove myself all the time, you know?
To a certain extent as well, it probably gave you a bit of your drive, you know, you really, it spurred you on to get to the next stage. And
no, it did, but it made it to where it made me a nightmare. Yeah. I had to win everything, every argument, you know, couldn't be wrong, couldn't be seen as weak, made me a nightmare, you know?
You touched on the self-destruction point, Tas. Was it only in America that you discovered drugs, or was that not really a thing in Australia? Was it when you got...
No, I discovered them in Australia.
Yeah.
But like skating, I treated the drugs like another sport. You know, let's see how much we can do. Let's, you know, just go for days and days, and how many at once. And then just, you know, everything was a contest. It was stupid.
And your first contest, I suppose, one of your first contests must have been mid-90s as well. I know that you certainly won the World Championships in 96. So from that dream of, you know, I'm never ever going to be able to, people telling you'll never beat Tony Hawk, you went over there, and within a matter of years, you'd done it.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it, actually. It was, you know, like I'm now looking back, because at the time I was cocky, you know, but I was doing tons of drugs. I was too loud for the crowd. In hindsight, you know, I wish I had have had respect for my elders, you know. You know, he was there first, you know. When I did all this mayhem, right, when I did the interviews, I had a couple of beers before some of the interviews, and I was fresh out of jail, right? So I was still in prison mode, still a bit angry. My kids were, you know, I'd lost my kids in America, and I'd vowed I'd never failed my daughter and my son. Next thing you know, I'm deported. I failed them, right? And I was always scared, because I'm always over the top about, you know, anyone going near my kids because of what happened to me. And so where I've lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
We're talking about, you know, in 96 when you went over and beat Hawk at first.
Yeah. So
you were saying you were quite cocky, and I think that was probably to do with
the cockiness, because it was the drugs, and I was always trying to prove myself, and you know, it was the go, you know, like that's right. That's what we're talking about. Like, it's now that I understand how blessed I was to be able to have achieved that dream. you know, because once I was there and I was in it, at the time, because I thought like, I'm going to run away to America, and if I become, you know, if I can beat Hawk, prove to them I can do it, then that means I'm not weak because of what happened, and my life will be different now, and everything will be happy, right? But once I'd achieved that, I was still, you know, like inside going, well, all right, I've done this. I still feel crap. I feel like I still have to prove myself, and then winning that comp, that it didn't change anything. I still had my issues to deal with.
Yeah.
You know, so at the time I was very ungrateful and put on this big show, like, yeah, I'm the tough guy, party guy, but it didn't fulfill like I thought it was going to. So from '96, they'd worked out I'd had a spondylolisthesis where I'd broken my back when I was a kid, which is another story. I didn't even know it at the time. I'd crushed something and something snapped off. But then I was told, you know, this is all in the doco. I memean, we don't have to go over it too much. All you have to do is watch the film. But when they worked out I'd crushed a vertebrae, I just was like, well, if I can't skate, I'm just going to keep partying. So from '96, it wasn't straight into a year and a half straight of just, you know, piles of just. I bought with that $10,000 I won, I bought 10 grand worth of coke, had a brick of it just in my dresser, and just drowned my sorrows from the broken back. Yeah.
And for those that don't know the story, you know, it was remarkable. You know, it was a tournament, and it went down to you and Hawk head to head. And before that, you broke your ribs that day. You know,
Yeah, I broke the rib. I slammed on a 720, and I'd hit sideways so hard that the bottom ribs popped up over the top of the other one. So it looked like if your ribs are like that, the bottom one popped and sat on top of that one. Right. And I had to pop it back down. So it was like really tender.
Was there ever a thought in your head that I'm in too much pain here, I can't go out and do this final run?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But I thought if I can just deal with the pain through the movement of the trick, I'd get little glimpses of no pain when I'm, say, standing on the flat, as I'm rolling across the flat, do the air, grab the board, spin for a second, and then you have to tuck to land it. So it was just excruciating pain in the times of trying to make things happen. But then it'd be like roll in, pain, cruise, pain, cruise, pain, cruise. So it was, you know, you just take it in zaps.
The video of yourself when you get told that you'd won, you know, it's hilarious. It's like, as you
I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. Yeah, I didn't think I'd won. I mean, Hawk, he was always hard to beat. He was definitely always hard to beat. He was always on, but he was always, you know, he'd play it, you know, at that point anyway. He'd play it. He'd stayed around the 6 foot mark, 4 foot to 6 foot mark, but then different trick every wall. So I thought he'd won that comp anyway. So, but I was, you know, because I think it was the first time that they'd seen, like, you know, going 10 foot high on a, you know, smaller vert ramps back then with kick flips. And so I think, you know, that just, you know, they gave it to me that day. But I didn't believe it.
You must see yourself, you know, looking back, Tas, you must see yourself, you know, also your brother, and I suppose Tony Hawk as well, you know, you really were pioneers of, you know, vert skating back then. You know, it was, street skating was kind of coming in at a stage, and you took that vert one to the next level and kept it relevant as well.
Well, I was just, you know, my favourite skater was Danny Way and Colin McKay, and same with my brother. And to me, they were the guys who were pioneering. We just got to the point where we were consistent with it on vert. But the video part we were watching was, I think it was Plan B, questionable. And so to me, it was Danny Way and Colin McKay. You know, I was just wished we could be as good as them, you know, but we, you know, to me, they were the best. But my brother and I, we were good in competitions and under the pressure, and, you know, so. Yeah.
I loved it when you spoke previously in interviews about, you know, you and your brother pushed each other to the edge. If he was number one, you wanted to be number one, and if you were number one, he wanted to be number one. And I suppose that challenge, it's that sibling rivalry as well that must have pushed you to the next level.
Well, if Ben wasn't there and I got beat by a couple of other guys, I probably would have accepted it. Oh, yeah, well, they're good, this and that. But because it was my little brother, I was like, nah,
I'm not having that.
I can't have that. It's my little brother, right?
So
it helped. Yeah, and because, I was a nightmare, Ben just wanted to beat me to rub it in, because we'd fight a lot. So it did work, but it was, it ended sadly, that whole thing with Ben's suicide, of course. But yeah.
I suppose, you've spoke about it previously, and obviously Ben got caught, smuggling cocaine from America back to Australia, and then he was unable to compete for 3 years. Did you feel a bit helpless at that point, Tas? Was there, you felt like you wanted to help, but it's almost out of your hands, isn't it?
Well, as I said, we were off our heads hard at that point, right? Yeah. And we'd always talked about it because of how much the prices are in Australia, but I didn't think he was going to actually go through with it.
Sure.
And then I hear he'd gone through with it, and he's called me saying he'd stuffed up, and then I was just like, what have you done? And yeah, it sucked. That was the start. I mean, yeah. I mean, for anyone who's watching, if you watch the doco, you'll see it. But it was a helpless thing. It was hard for him to be able to go to a normal life while I was still in the States. And I just kept thinking, and I didn't think I'd be able to operate in a normal world. I didn't think I could ever do a 9-to-5 job. All I knew was skating. And, and plus being that cooked on the drugs, there's no clarity,
Of course. Do you feel that, that Ben's almost downfall from going across to Australia with the drugs, do you think that, complemented your downfall to a certain extent as well? Do you think, I know you've touched on it before.
Well, we were already on our downfall. That's the thing. That just sealed the deal that he couldn't get back to the States to skate. It just sealed the deal. But we were already on that path anyway. We were partying hard, doing lots of drugs, didn't really care to play the game, or, just wasn't expecting to live past 30, to be honest.
Yeah.
So
I think for young people that are skateboarding and they're maybe 17, 18, 19 just now, that you think 30 is an old age, you don't think anybody's going to live past that, but it seems like you guys...
Tell me about it. Yeah, I'm 45 now. I can't believe it, mate.
It seems like you guys really, you lived life fast at that point, didn't you? There was no stopping you.
Well, it's not so much just because you're young. It just depends on when you get caught up in drugs. I mean, there's drug addicts these days, late bloomer guys who get into the ice in their 40s and they never recover. They get full ice heads from 40 on, 50, 60, die in it. You just, you're better off if you're going to go down that route. I mean, you're better off not doing drugs. It's a bad door opener, you just, if you do get it over with in your younger years, you can somewhat recover. But if you get stuck into it when you're older, which I've seen it happen to other people too, it's hard to start again when you're older. You don't have the energy to rebuild, work normal, going from good money to have, starting at a normal job. And, so it just depends what age you start. But it doesn't matter when you start. You sort of get blinded to the reality of life, and you'll just live fast until it's over, till you're either dead or in prison. Yeah.
Sometimes think about, what would you have done differently now if you had to go back and do it again? Because, I mean, I know that you've mentioned before that being Australian and going into an American environment, it almost seemed like you were the outsiders from the start.
Well, yes and no, right? Yes, on the point that Christmas time and, holiday time, you never get to go be around your own family if you're stuck there, because I'd stayed and thrown a ticket away and didn't have a visa. So that part would be easier to be American, to be able to live there and chase your dream. You can treat it like a normal job. But because, like, for me, what it did was it always just felt like I was on some massive holiday in, you know, fairyland or Disneyland or heaven to me, skate heaven. So I never, you know, could, it was never a chance to really be grounded because I was like, I'm in America.
Living the dream.
Plays rules.
Yeah.
You know, I'm living the dream, you know, like if you could. So that's the part that, you know, you feel like you can't use. But me personally, this isn't every Aussie. There's other people who have gone there and been street business and been switched on, but that's where the drugs sort of ruined it for me. But yeah, I mean, for the most part though, if I had kept my mouth shut and hadn't been so cocky, I mean, I had a lot of good friends there too. So, you know, like any sport, you know, there's always going to be competition. So it's not so much if you're the outside. I should have played the game better, but I get a chance now to talk to a lot of people who are doing it really hard, and you know, and like it's a, you know, I get a lot of, because of all this mayhem, I get to talk to I get a lot of messages of people where you know, brothers or sisters or family members have suicided, and people who are struggling with drugs, and you know, because when I first got out of jail, you know, I didn't do drugs for the 3 years I was locked up. But then when I got out, I just kept having these rage issues, and I kept, without fail, I'd always end up relapsing again. And I wouldn't want to do it, but it's like I would just go through the motions. Something bad would happen. I'd feel bad. I'd have a few drinks. Bang. Next thing you know, I'm doing ice or I'm doing coke. And it sounds like an excuse, but it was just a pattern I just couldn't break. It was like, you know, like people who just can't stop smoking cigarettes. It sounds easy,
It's an addiction.
but it was,
yeah, it's an addiction.
but it was just something I just couldn't break. I mean, I'd go a long time without doing ice, and then I'd see a movie with the ice pipe in there or someone shooting up. Then all of a sudden I'd have a dream and I'd feel it like I was on it, like my tongue going numb and feeling the rush and all this stuff. And then bang, I was back up and running, and I was going to church and everything. And then basically, I remember when I was in the States, my dad, you know, because he was a martial art teacher and he was no stranger to, you know, violence and stuff. But when I used to snap, he used to trip out. He'd look at me and be like, "You need an exorcism." Like he'd say I'd look like the exorcist, right? Yeah. And then finally, after, because I had a lot of prayers answered in prison, you know, like it was, no doubt it was God. He couldn't have made certain things happen, right? It was just the way things unfolded. I mean, I know some people might not believe it, but there's also a lot of believers out there. They'll know what I'm talking about. But then when I got out, I kept, you know, and even my wife, Helen, she, who I'm with now, with Billy in Australia, she started seeing like a blankness come over me, and she knew it wasn't me in there type thing. And then I got led to this church called Oracle Ministries, and they do deliverance, you know, and I started getting prayers delivering me from just a spiritual oppression, from drug addiction, from rage. And, you know, like, I know it might sound nuts to a lot of people, but when I first got my first few deliverances done, you know, I'd start yawning. They'd say some people start vomiting when they're getting these spirits cast out of them, or they start yawning or crying. Me, I yawned like 20 times in a row, mate. When I yawn normally, you only yawn once or twice, and then you might catch one of someone else. Man, I yawned 20 times, one after the other. I mean, I got no reason to lie. Yeah. I know people who just think you're cooked, you're this and that, right? But I'm telling you, this is what happened, and I felt lighter. And then all of a sudden, I was able to resist the urges. It was just crazy. And then I kept working on this deliverance, and my friend Pete McMaster, I mean, he's on YouTube. He's delivered a lot of people. I kept pursuing the deliverance, and now I've managed to get off my antipsychotic meds, which I was on for 15 years.
Amazing.
And mate, and you know, because in the West they like to talk about everything. You know, they like to cancel out the spiritual for the most part, but the West, we're the only country. I mean, now the New Age stuff's coming in; people are starting to believe in that, but for the most part, every other civilization, most other parts in the world, they all still believe in the spiritual. You go to Africa, there's witch doctors, voodoo. And I've, you know, because I opened myself up to that stuff with the drugs and, you know, like in the Bible, it says that drugs falls under sorcery, pharmakia. I used to think sorcery was just, you know, like make-believe Harry Potter stuff. The sorcerer. Yeah. But no, sorcery is, you know, you do that many drugs, you're opening yourself up to the spiritual realm, but in the wrong way. So once I started reading the Bible and I started reading things like Jesus cast out demons, and it says to break strongholds and, you know, all these, you know, like your bad habits can be a stronghold, and the spirit, you know, like how I'd feel out of nowhere. Just all of a sudden, I'd feel and taste meth and smell it after not touching it for years, and then be just drawn to it. To all of a sudden, after yawning 20 times in a row, lifted, gone, being able to control myself, not needing Seroquels or Lexapros anymore. Like, I got no reason to spill this because I know people are just going to go, "You're cooked. You need to be back on your meds," right? But I'm telling you, it's real. And
as you mentioned, you know, that you had a relationship with God from a very young age, and then obviously
I would always pray. But back to what you were saying, would I have changed things, right?
Yeah.
To me, what I'm thinking now is this is the best thing that could have happened, all the bad stuff, because of what's going on now. I mean, I know it's painful, but at the end of the day, we are all going to die. We're not taking anything with us, right? We are all going to die. We're all going to front God, whether they believe in it or not. Anyone, we're going to front God. We're all going to die. And if all the mistakes I made has put me in this position now to when these people who are struggling get in touch with me, there's a few crew I've put them onto my friends who do the deliverance. They've seen big changes in their lives. They're getting over things. So back to what you said, would I have changed anything? No, I don't. I mean, of course, if I had the chance, I wouldn't want to hurt the certain people I did, but I can't go back, and I can see this is the best thing that's happened to be able to help other people, because at the end of the day, I'm halfway through my life. We're all going to die soon anyway. I mean, life is short. My dad's gone. My brother's gone. I just want to do the right thing by God. So,
and you know, as I said, you had this relationship with God from a young age, but I suppose maybe going into prison, you know, brought that back to you because you were spending days and hours reading the Bible and being around people who, you know, were obviously very dangerous people as well. It was maybe a comfort zone for you.
Well, it wasn't so much the comfort. I'm a realist, right? And this is, people might laugh at me saying that, but I am. I'm actually a realist, right? If I wanted to feel good, I would go and get, you know, like, you know, $600 of Coke, or, you know, a bunch of ice, needles, heroin, and I'd shoot up to feel better. So if it was just words in the book and I wasn't feeling peace come, I'd be like, this is a load of crap. I'm just going to keep doing drugs until I die, right? Yeah. But the fact is, peace came. And, you know, just people, the fact that me and Helen are still together through all of this is another miracle. Like, I mean, with what me and Colleen went through, me and Helen went through even worse, and she stuck it out, you know, and that's a miracle in itself. And I remember I had a friend, right? He was a pretty big ice dealer in, you know, like crystal meth in California. He was, you know, moving a lot of it. And I remember him telling me, because I was starting to go to jail quite, you know, a bit. And he's just like, you know, Tas, you're better off just get yourself a Christian chick. Because when you go in, because, you know, I'm talking to him, he's going in all the time. I'm always getting in trouble starting to go in. And he's like, well, when you go in, he said, he goes, they think that God's watching them, so they won't cheat on you. and they'll look after the kids because they think God's watching you. He became a pastor, man.
No way. Yeah.
So he took a Christian girl on because he got sick of being cheated on, right? And then he's ended up in prison, and then boom, he's found God to top it off. He's become a pastor and quit that life.
Right.
So all these psychos I knew were turning to God, and then I'm in there. And then even my dad, we were never really religious, except for my yaya. Me and her used to when I was real young, but then I went the wrong way. But then my dad, in the end, who never really believed, he'd read the Bible and he's gone, listen, he goes, I know people don't believe it. He's gone, but with my life, with everything I did, he goes, the Bible's actually real. I've paid the price for everything I've done. God won't be mocked. You want to live a certain way. He's gone, look what's happened to me, Tas. I've used to be really violent and did a lot of bad things when he was growing up. He goes, my son's died in a murder-suicide. You're a complete train wreck, drug addict. I don't know if you're going to survive. He's gone, I've read the Bible. It's real. He goes, you need God. All the advice I gave you when I was young, he goes, mate, we should have been reading the Bible. He's gone straight up. All the answers are there. Bang, Dad dies 2 weeks later after that phone call. Then I'm on a rampage, jump on a plane to South America. Then next thing you know, I'm locked up because I'm trying to bring a kilo of coke through. Because I remember I was with Helen and I've looked up to the sky and I've sworn at God, F you, and bring it on. How much worse can it get? Then I've come up with the idea to, I stayed up for 2 weeks, probably a few nano naps here and there, like just blanking out, but I was shooting up speed the entire time. I had a bowl of it and just finished the lot while planning this trip to South America to pick up a kilo of coke. Then I'm, just bang, ended up in Sydney jails, right? And then I remember what I said to God, bring it on.
You were with Helen when you went to Australia, Tas, yeah?
What was that?
You were with Helen when you went to
Argentina. So I was with Helen, then jumped on the plane to Argentina to pick up these drugs. And next thing you know, all that shenanigan happened. I got another talk I did where it can get into a lot of the detail from South America. It was the finer details. That's on YouTube if anyone's interested. But that gets into, you could, because we could just talk for hours, right? But anyway, I remember finally being in my jail cell and I wasn't so tough anymore. So I've gone from F you, bring it on, God, to please, God, I don't want to be in jail forever. Because Billy was just born and, my drug courage is wearing off and I just didn't want to be in jail and I didn't want to fail another kid. So I started reading the Bible and, man, was it real. And then just the prayers, the answers in there, man, I prayed for, there was one kid in there, right? I was praying for him. He was like an 18-year-old kid in one of the big jails. We were in Goulburn in Australia, in X-Wing, pretty violent jail. And he had this cellmate who kept trying to rape him every night, right? And this guy was gang affiliated. He was in for armed rob. He was with one of the bigger gangs there. And if you're an Aussie or a Greek or Italian, you consider the floater in Australian prisons, where when I was in America, if you're white, you either go with the Nazi skinheads, which I'm not a bloody racist, so you either go with them, or the Peckerwoods, which is the whites. So I went with them. So when I got to Australia, I was like, okay, so who's the white rep? And they go, white rep? What are you talking about? I'm like, yeah. And they've gone, mate, you're a floater, right? So me and this kid, we're just on our own. So all the Aussies are either bikies or you're with the Kooris, the Aboriginals, or the Lebos and the Asians. They all stick together. And well, this is the Sydney jails anyway. I didn't do jail in Melbourne. But we're just floaters. So this guy, every night, we were just cracking jokes because sometimes, this is, when I first went into jail, I hadn't really, God was answering prayers, but I hadn't read much Bible yet, so I was still a bit loose, really bad taste in jokes. We'd always put the fear into new kids who come to these jails. They'd be in line. I'd be just taking the piss, just like, oh, this one's cute. And then they turn around and then you just blow a kiss at them and then just do their heads in, right, until they get to know you. So I started doing this, and this other guy I was friends with, I didn't really know him, but we were just having laughs. Then anyway, he was actually cellmates with this young kid who I became friends with. And then he's come to me, he's like, Tas, I've worked. He goes, you just joke about it. He's gone, this guy, he's actually trying to rape me. And I've gone, are you serious?
Oh no.
And then because it was himself, I've gone, bro, no way. I just forgot where I was, and he actually was trying to rape him. And I'm like, well, what do you expect me to do, man? He's gang affiliated. If he finds out you're talking about him, he'll just stab you or just bash you, send you to protection, and then I'll cop it from him and all his guys in all the different jails. I'm not even from Sydney, right? I've gone, mate, there's nothing I can do. But he was making fun of me for reading the Bible and being a Christian, right? Because he had his Slayer written on his, he thought he was hard, young kid. But I'm just going, well, I've had prayers answered, mate. Will you give God a try? You've been making fun of it. He goes, I'll try anything. Let's do it. So we prayed Psalm 23. He said he'd do it God's way if he got him off his back, right? At the same time, I was reading the Bible. I was reading in Exodus that God said, I'm the God of hearts. I will harden Pharaoh's heart and soften it 7 times or whatever the amount was with the signs and wonders, just so you can see that I really am God. And then I'm sitting there reading this going, really? I'm the God of hearts? What's this mean, right? So then but I knew prayers were getting answered, but the Bible was getting hard to stomach at times with some of the stories, right? So we just started praying together. And then I was thinking, well, maybe this will be more personal evidence for me. Right after we finished praying, and he was like heartfelt praying, right, to get this guy off his back. Within an hour, these guys come in. Mate, this is a guy who was like, 28, in for armed rob, tough guy. Come in acting like he was a 12-year-old boy in trouble. He's going, oh, did he say anything? Like completely dropped his courage. I'm like, nah, bro, he's cool. No one said anything. He's gone, oh, okay, cool, Tas. Like he wasn't in his gang anymore. It was weird. It was like God's, made him cower. He's the God of hearts. He went and told him straight after that, when we were in the yard, he goes, go get a cell change. If you say anything, you're going to get stabbed up. But if you don't say a word, we're sweet. It's over. You got a cell change within a couple of hours of praying that prayer with me. And that was more confirmation for me how God answers prayers. And then the list can go on. I can go on and on and on. So, mate, that was when I was like, whoa, okay, you're real. All right, sweet. Bible's real. This is a trip. I might not understand it, but it's a trip.
And do you think, Tas, that all this tragedy had to happen to you for you to really realise this? You lost your brother, you lost your dad, you lost your family in America. Do you think if that hadn't happened, it might have taken longer for you to realise?
Well, the thicker you are, the bigger punishments you need. So I was pretty thick. I needed some serious punishments to wake me up.
And when
100%.
And do you think that if you've tried to, would you ever try and rekindle your relationship with your family in America now that you're a reformed character?
Well, look, like I think Colleen's heart's softening. I've been talking to her brother Terrence. They've seen I've trying my best. They've seen I've changed. I was a real nightmare for Colleen. I'm really sorry about all that, big time. But Colleen softened. She let Terrence send me some of my medals for Billy to have. I haven't been in touch with my kids yet. I hope one day they can forgive me for failing them and the pain I caused their mother. But there's been a little bit of talk between me and Terrence, and I'm just hoping that Colleen can find it in her heart to forgive me, and that we could, I understand that I had to be cut off, because if I was in Australia and they're in America and I couldn't go back there, I mean, it just would have been torturous just to talk to them the whole time on Skype and when are you coming home, Daddy, and all this stuff. Like, it's a painful situation, but I'm still praying that it happens. But I've had a small victory, like Terrence is at least talking to me now with everything that went down. I mean, I wasn't a nice person back then, and I'm just thankful for that, And I take no news as good news. If he doesn't tell me anything about my kids, that means nothing bad's happened. So I got to look at the positives.
And I suppose that makes you a better dad, to Billy out in Australia as well. You don't want to lose him. You've got a great relationship there. I've seen you out skateboarding together as well. And
yeah, Billy, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still a work in progress. I'm not
not perfect yet.
No one's perfect, mate. But I definitely hate the life that I hate what the devil has to offer. It's fun for a season, but then, mate, it just leads to a heartache.
What
It
advice?
really.
What advice would you give to your kid that's getting into skateboarding and get his future ahead of? And what would you say?
Well, Billy, funny enough, was because he's pretty short for his age. Me and Billy, we pray a lot, right? He was getting bullied when he was at school, and I was getting close to. This is when I first got out of jail. This kid was, picking on Billy, and I had the old thoughts coming in, like, well, I'll just grab this kid's dad in front of this kid and belt the dad and go, you touch my son, this is going to happen to your dad every time type attitude. But then I was like, how can I do that? Like, I'm supposed to believe in God. Then I was like, well, actually, Billy, come here. When I was in jail, I had dramas. We prayed. And, I got no reason to lie. Me and Billy, we prayed one night. Billy prayed for this kid. And then the next day, the bully became his mate. So, bang, next day, prayer answered again. And this kid was hitting him, pushing him around, and then they became mates. So Billy understands that prayer works too, and God has his back.
And I'm sure there'll be many skateboarding fans watching this, wondering if they can see any of your tricks once again. You eventually got that 900 landed as well. You should have got.
Thank you, God, for that. Yeah, I was really sore at the end of that. I'd been through too many injuries before that, then jail, and then to be able to get that after all of that, I was pretty appreciative. And for my mate Peter Wilson, who built the mega ramp for me to be able to do it on. So yeah.
Are you still skating regularly then, Tas?
No, I haven't. I've been skating bowls and street with my son. I crushed my vertebrae again riding mega, and I just was putting too much emphasis on thinking that I'm going to get my kids back by trying to take over the world on my skateboard again. And that's not what God wants. I'm just going to trust him as I have been, and I'll just skate for fun now. If I want to get back into mega, I will. If I want to get into vert, I will. But at the moment, Billy and I, before COVID anyway, we're riding a lot of motocross, because I used to ride moto before I got into skating. So I've got some mates. Shane Boyd, he owns the track down at Park 4 MX, and my mate Daniel Murray and Jesse and Chris Camilleri and Swiv and all these boys, psychos on motorbikes. And so Billy and I, we've been having fun with these guys. It's like mega, but faster.
More dangerous.
And it's got suspension. Yeah. And there's a lot of prayer involved, because you can come off bad on a motorbike. So we're praying protection all the time, every time we ride. So you want to stay close to God when you're on a motocross track.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and thanks so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you, brother.